to another episode of Jim's Allotment Garden. Okay, so just to give you a really quick update on the chickens. Obviously, a few have expressed sort of concerns about the amount of ventilation I'd got in here. But I just wanted to sort of put your mind at rest and just sort of explain what I've been doing. I muck out the chickens every couple of weeks, as you can see. You know, I take everything out, absolutely all the straw. I have still got ventilation along the bottom here, anyway. And there's various sort of holes all over the place to vent, but all of the straw comes out, and I get about 4 or 5 barrows full. Obviously this one's only half full, but of straw, and then I'll put about half a bale of straw in today, and then next week I'll put another half bale of straw in, and then you know, then the chickens will kick that about and all that stuff, and that'll keep them nice and dry. Obviously it is watertight in here, but you know, even though that generates a reasonable amount of chicken muck, this stuff is absolutely gold dust for your allotments. You know, what I'll be doing is digging all of this into the plot where the potatoes, well, everything will be going. I'll spread that about and rotivate all that in, and that'll break down in between now and when I dig it in the spring, and you know, that'll be a really good fertiliser for the ground and source of carbon. So that's basically, you know, I'll sort of clean it down. Obviously I've got a paved area here where the food and stuff goes, and then this bit down here is basically just dirt, and this gets sort of raked out, if you like, down to the earth, and then the chickens will scratch around in there, but this gets covered in straw as well. So I'll just put the straw around and I'll show you what it looks like. This camellia is looking really fantastic at the moment, but unfortunately it's absolutely smothered in flowers and bud, but it seems to be, it's most certainly flowering a lot earlier than it does normally, and I'm concerned that the wind and the rain are going to have quite an effect on it, but it's putting up not a bad show at the moment, and hopefully these flowers will last as long as they can. They normally last about 3 weeks. But these have all opened in the last kind of 3 or 4 days, and I'm concerned that by the end of the week, you can see this one's already damaged through the wind and the rain. I'm concerned that a lot of these will be all over the floor. So, it seems an absolute age since I last did some comments and questions and that, so I thought I'd just catch up with what's come over in the last few months. The first one comes from Daz or Slasher, and he was saying, sort of when's the best time to dig in muck? Now, basically, as long as your muck's reasonably well rotted, there's no reason why you can't dig it in now. Obviously, you know, with the ground being so wet and stuff like that, you know, it is a little bit difficult to get it in. So what I would suggest is, as long as your ground is dry enough to dig, then what you can do is basically just dig it in. What a lot of people do actually is dig the ground over during the winter, or sort of the back end of last year, sort of September, October, which is when I do the majority of my digging, and then just spread the muck out onto the surface of the ground. Leave it there, you know, over winter if you wish, or you can do it later on. You know, so it depends on when you get it, and then basically just rotivate the ground. And as you rotivate the ground, what it will do is it'll dig it all, mix it all into the ground and stuff like that. Now, obviously, when you rotivate the ground, what you're doing is you're doing two things. You're breaking the soil down, you know, so it's more friable. So you've got no air pocket or anything like that in the soil. But you're also sort of mixing everything that's under the ground to the top. Because what you want to do is bring the minerals and all the goodness and stuff like that, which is obviously as it rains, all the minerals kind of wash to the bottom of the to the ground. So when you're turning it, what you're doing is you're bringing that goodness, if you like, back to the surface, so that when you put your young plants in there, they can get to the nutrients which are in the soil. So it is always the right thing to do to rotivate the ground, or to dig it at least a week or so before you plant. Depending on the crop that you're putting in there, what you don't want to do is dig the ground literally the day before you plant it, because basically the ground will sort of settle over a couple of days as as the ground settles down again. What you can do is, if you plant into it straight away, it can the seeds can sink a little bit, or whatever. The best thing to do is to dig it, leave it for a week or so to settle, and then rake it over, and then put your sort of plants in afterwards. But what I suggest you do, if you haven't already put muck in the ground and you're going to get some, is just put it over the ground for now. Because I think the majority of people, most certainly in the UK, their ground will be wet, and you're not able to dig it over properly. Put the muck on top of the ground, spread it all out, and then the ground, the rain will wash goodness into the ground anyway. And then rotivate the ground, or turn the ground if you haven't got a rotivator. Dig it in a sort of couple of weeks' time when the ground's dried out, and then a week or so after that you can start to plant your sort of crops into it. The only one bit of advice I would say is if your muck's quite strawy, there's a lot of straw in there, what it can do is it can clog up the rotivator rotors, if you like. So if the straw is reasonably long, it can kind of block things up. So just be careful of that. Don't put too much in. Otherwise it'll just get clogged up into the rotivator, which I've had problems like that in the past. So that's the best bit of advice I can give you, Dan. Next comment comes from Adrian Forrester, and he asked basically when's the best time to grow, to put the beans and the sunflowers in. Right, I know you're raring to go, but the one thing you need to be mindful of is frost, because frost will kill the beans and it'll kill the sunflowers as well. So typically what the rule of thumb is the frosts will end at the end of May, so that's the kind of time where you want to be sort of putting them out. Now if you've got a heated greenhouse, obviously you don't really need to worry about this too much. I don't tend to heat the greenhouse too much, only if there is. I always plan to get things ready for the end of May, planting them out in June. That's when the majority of my stuff goes out. Obviously this is for the UK. If you're in other countries, obviously you're warm, you don't need to worry about the frost too much. So what I tend to do is plant the beans mid-May, and then sunflowers as well around mid-May, so that by the time you get to the end of May, they've started to grow and they're ready. And then basically you plant them out first couple of weeks of May, basically. So first couple of weeks of June. So by the time you've got to the middle of June, you should have all your beans out in the ground and sort of growing away. Then you're almost guaranteed to not have any frost. We have had frosts in June before. In fact, when was it? About 4 years ago. The first week in June we had a frost. But obviously, that's the risk you take. You can get frosts through June, but they are rare in the UK anyway. So the best thing I can advise you is plant your beans and your sunflowers sort of middle of May, middle to the end of May. That's the kind of time period you want, and that's going to give them more than enough growing season to grow to 11 foot tall and whatever else. That's the sunflowers, and the beans will obviously grow. That'll give you more than enough, and then you'll be harvesting around sort of end of July, August time. That's when the beans will start to actually fruit. If you do want earlier beans, you can grow them earlier in a heated greenhouse, but the one thing that you need to be mindful of is when beans grow, they do shoot really quickly. They can be growing a couple of inches a day, so as soon as they do start to grow, they will grow really quickly. And if you do plant them too much earlier than the middle of May, what you may well find is that by the time you get them outside, they're sort of 4 foot high. So just be mindful of that. If you are going to plant them earlier, what I would suggest you do is plant them in larger pots. Now, I always plant the beans in sort of 4-inch pots, sort of pots like that. I always grow my beans in these, and the deeper ones like that. I always grow the beans and the sunflowers in these, which is a 4-inch pot. If you are going to plant them earlier and keep them in the greenhouse for a bit longer to give them a better head start, in all honesty, I would plant them in more of a sort of pot, sort of more like that, to give them a bit more sort of growing room in there. The one thing I will say though is I have done this in the past. I've grown some earlies and some around the mid-May. So I've started some off at the beginning of May, and I've started some off in the middle of May. And to be honest with you, you plant them out, and within a week or 2 weeks, the later ones have caught up with the early ones. And in some instances, they're actually healthier plants as well. Because if you do have a cold snap, it can stunt the growth, and it takes the plant a while to kind of recover from that. So in all honesty, you've not got a lot to gain from planting them any earlier than the middle of May. In all honesty, that's what I found in the past. In fact, last year I planted the beans a little bit too early, and then I planted some about a fortnight later, and within a couple of weeks of planting them out, you couldn't tell one from the other. The later ones had caught up with the early ones, and most certainly within 3 weeks, and they were all fruiting pretty much at the same time. So I don't think you got much to gain. Next comment comes from Nigel over in Wolverhampton, Muddy Boots, and he was saying about treating metal. Now I've had a couple of questions on this. Obviously this is up to do with the fruit cage I've been building. Always with metal, the 3 best bits of advice I can give you is always prime with the metal. Clean the metal off as best you can. You haven't got to get it absolutely pristine clean, but most certainly always primer the paint. Gloss paint or whatever won't stick to metal like it will do to wood. So you always have to prime the metal so that the gloss or the finished coat has got something to bond to. So clean the metal up, always prime it. That's the best thing I can advice I can give you. The primer's not going to be very thick. You can thin it down with terps or white spirit. As long as you've got a thin coat on there, the paint will adhere to it. The second bit of advice I can give you is for painting anything outside, always use exterior rated paint. Typically paint comes in sort of interior only, wood and metal, or just wood, and exterior or sort of interior or whatever. So what I would suggest is always use exterior paint. You can kind of get away with wood paint on metal, to be honest with you, if you've got the right primer on there, but I would always recommend that you use a paint which is suitable for metal and is suitable for external use. If you don't do those things, the paint's likely to flake off, or it's porous and the water will get through it into the metal, and obviously the metal will start to corrode or rust if it's iron, and then the paint will flake off, and then you basically back to square one. You end up painting it again. So it's a little bit more expensive, but get exterior metal paint, and as I've explained whilst I've been doing the tunnel, I just get odds and ends of paint, mix them together for anything in the allotment. Bit of black and a bit of white, put it together and get the grey. And grey is a pretty well universal colour. You can paint pretty much everything with that. So that's what I do. Don't be worried about mixing makes. I know possibly somebody will sort of cringe at me saying that, but if you've got Crown and you've got some other make, there's no reason why you can't mix them together. They should be okay. Obviously, if you are mixing paints, don't try and mix a water-based paint with a like turpentine or oil-based paint. They've got to be the same type of paint to do it. But yeah, if you're ever painting metal for outside, always primer it first. Well, even if it's inside, always primer it first, and then give that a good 24 to 48 hours to dry off. So that's nice and dry, and then paint it with your top coat afterwards, and then it'll last you a good long time then. Next comment comes from Andy at UK Toe Cutter, and he was saying about the fact he wished he could weld. Don't be put off by welding. When I first started off, I was reasonably young when I started welding, to be honest with you. I was only about 12 or 13 years old when I started welding. But in all honesty, welding is not anywhere near as difficult as it looks. most certainly with a MIG welder, if I can make any suggestion, always go for a MIG welder if you're welding steel or anything like that, because they are really easy to use. They're not overly expensive. You know, you can pick up a reasonably good MIG welder for less than £100. I would recommend to get a Clark's welder, and you know, pretty much within £100 you can set yourself up with a welder and the gas and the wire that you need to get yourself started. And in all honesty, it isn't difficult. All you got to do is follow very simple rules. Whatever you're welding, make sure it's nice and clean. There's no rust or anything or paint on there. So it's nice clean metal. Bring the two pieces of metal that you want to weld together as close as you can get them. If you wanted to make a seamless weld, obviously you need to separate them by about 1 millimetre or so, as I've explained. And then all you got to do basically is point the welder and press the button, and it'll weld it. Always, if you've never welded before, get a couple of bits of scrap metal and just practice welding. But it's not overly complicated. If anybody wants any tips on welding, I'm always happy to put a video out to show you how to do it. But really, I'm self-taught. I was never shown how to weld properly. I started off with an arc welder, which is basically a stick. That's hard. That is not easy to do. I moved on to a MIG welder probably about sort of 20-25 years ago, and I've never looked back. MIG welding's really easy to do. So if you have an idea of welding, you know, don't be put off by it. It's not difficult. You don't need any specialised training. You know, I can explain how to do it in more detail if you wish. Drop a comment on the channel, and I'm more than happy to put a video out explaining how to do it. But it is really easy. Setting up the welder is the trick. You know, as soon as your welder's set up, you know, you've got your wire speed right, and you've got the gas right, and you've got the power rating right. You just weld away. And you know, I very rarely change the settings on my welder. I just basically just change the gas bottles and the wire when it needs changing, and I just you know, crack on welding. I don't change it too often. So as I say, if you want a more detailed explanation, I'm more than happy to put a video out. But MIG welding is really easy to do. So you know, obviously, get yourself some gloves. Get yourself obviously a welding master to do it, and a welder, and away you go. I would recommend Clark's. Clark's is sold by Machine Mart. So if you look at your local Machine Mart shops, they will have, you know, a whole range of Clark's welders. I recommend them because you can get the parts easily in the UK. Obviously, different countries have you know, different makes, but most certainly in the UK, I would advise you go for Clark's because you can get the parts, and you know, they're easy to sort of look after and stuff. So, and to be honest with you, I don't know where I'd be without my welder, because you know, you can quickly knock stuff up for the garden, the house, or whatever you're doing. Cars, whatever, you know, if you need anything, you can you know, sort of quickly make it, and it will pay for itself. Welders are expensive to buy, obviously they're £100 or so, but most certainly, you know, within a year or so of having it, if you're anything like me, it'll pay for itself, you know, because you can make stuff and away you go. So, but yeah, definitely. Don't be frightened of welding. If you want to have a go out and buy yourself a welder and have a go, because it really isn't difficult. Liz put a comment on about polytunnel plastic. Polytunnel plastic comes in a number of gauges. Liz has got a tunnel that basically the plastic lasts about 5 to 10 years, depending on where you live, and you know, you need to replace it every so often. So the best place I've found for it is go on eBay, which is obviously worldwide. On there, you'll see all the different grades in there, and obviously, you know, you can get thinner plastic, which is cheaper, or you can get the thicker grade plastic. If I was you, I would go for the thicker plastic grade because it'll last longer and you haven't got to mess about so much. But it's not overly expensive. eBay is a really cheap way of getting the plastic. They'll post it out to you, and then you know, you just got to put it up. So if you do want to replace the plastic on your polytunnel, just go on eBay, put in polytunnel plastic, and you'll see a whole raft of it coming up. And just pick the best one that you want. Obviously, they come in various pre-cut sizes, or you can you can get it cut to whatever size you want really. And that is the cheapest way of doing it. I wouldn't advise you go to garden centres because they're overly priced. To be honest with you, eBay is most certainly the cheapest way of doing it, and they'll put you in touch with various companies who do it online, which is the cheapest way of doing it. Next comment comes from Patrick Meeham, and he was saying he was worried about me burning my hands welding. I'll put a comment on there saying I've burnt my hands enough to realise where to touch and where not to. When you're welding, the heat is quite localised. So if you've got a piece of metal and you're welding in an area like that, really the heat's only going to be in that sort of 50p size piece of metal, if you like. Obviously, as if you do a long weld, obviously it'll radiate out. But don't worry. More often than not, when you're welding, as long as you don't touch within an inch or so of where you've welded, the metal's going to be cool enough to touch. So don't worry about that. When you're welding, it doesn't heat up the whole piece of metal. It's only just basically locally. It'll actually heat it up. Next comment comes from Jan's Allotment Gardening, and she was saying, if you weld pieces of metal together, is it as strong as the metal? Now, if you do the weld properly, really the weld should be stronger than the original pipe. So if you've got two pieces of metal or pipe or whatever, and you put them together and you weld two pieces together, by rights the weld should be stronger than the actual piece of metal that you started with the following couple of conditions. The first one is if you're welding mould steel together. Mould steel is quite bendy and sort of pliable, malleable, if you like. You can bend it and you can put it into various shapes. If you weld something, what it'll do is it'll change the property of the steel, and the carbon that's in the steel. So carbon's made up of iron and carbon. If you heat up the steel, the carbon will migrate to the surface of the metal and make it a little bit more brittle. So if you heat up a metal, steel, what it will do is it'll make the metal harder, but also more brittle. So what you can do is if you weld something, obviously you've heated it up, the carbon will come to the surface, so it will make where you've heated it up slightly more harder and slightly more brittle. But if you do it with a MIG welder, it's not that much, to be honest with you. But that's really the only caveat. If you grind the weld off like I do, so it's smooth, so you can't tell the weld's there, what that can do is reduce the size of the weld, obviously because you're grinding part of it off. So that does have a tendency to weaken it. But if you get the weld nice and hot and you get plenty of penetration, i.e., what I mean by penetration is the two pieces of metal that you start with, you're actually melting them as well. So the weld's not sitting on the metal, but it's melting that metal as well. Then you'll find that it's all fused together. If you weld something and you don't get it hot enough, what will happen is the weld sits on the actual metal, but doesn't actually stick the metal together properly. It just kind of sits on the top. If that's the case, obviously it'll be weaker. But so as long as you get plenty of penetration, so the two pieces of metal melt and you've got the weld in there, so they're basically fused together, it's going to be as strong as the original material, if not stronger. So that's the best bit of advice I can give you. Next comment comes from Jacqueline Branham, and also Linda Penny put this very similar comment, and saying, how are you going to move the tunnel to your allotment? Well, on the beginning and end of all the videos, you'll see me walk into the greenhouse with a gate behind me, which is just there. That's the gate to my garden, and the tunnel is literally just the other side of that gate. So all I've got to do is dismantle it into the pieces. As you know, I've made it in different sections, and all of them sections are basically carryable through that gate and onto the allotment. So it's going to be really easy. All I need to do is take the tunnel apart into its various pieces, the hoops, the sides, the ends, and I can walk them through that gate onto the allotment, put it all back together, and away you go. So it's literally just the other side of that gate, so no problem at all. Next question comes from Graham Thompson, who put a really nice comment on there, and he said it's nice that I know what I'm doing with DIY, and I also make videos to explain to other people. And I can't explain enough how useful I've found YouTube, because there's certain things that I want to do, and I haven't done it before, so I haven't got the knowledge of how to do it or whatever. And I like to put something back on YouTube as well. Obviously, there's things that I'm doing that perhaps other people won't have the courage to do, or the the confidence, perhaps is a better word to use, the confidence to do. And I find certain things really easy to do. So if I show you how to do it, obviously then you can do it yourself on your allotment, and and save yourself a bit of money in the process, and basically learn from it. So which is what YouTube's all about. It's all about sharing knowledge and information, and making it easy for other people to do what you've done. So Graham, that's exactly why I make the videos, to help other people, and I also use YouTube myself to help to help me. Very good example is my phone broke a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago. I've got one of these old BlackBerry phones. I've had this 9 years. It's one of the original ones, and the button in the middle broke. Got no idea how to take one of these apart. I've never done it before. I've taken phones apart before, but I've never taken one of these apart. And I went on YouTube, put in BlackBerry phone, blah blah blah, all come after some videos, and the first video I clicked on showed me exactly how to take this apart, to put the new piece in, and to put it all back together. And that was absolutely fantastic. It was absolute godsend to me, to be honest with you. And without that video I wouldn't have had an idea of how to have done it, but this chap had put a video on explaining how to take a BlackBerry phone apart, to change the part that was broken, and then put it all back together, which was absolutely fantastic. I wouldn't have had the first idea really of how to take the thing apart. I'd have probably broken it in taking it apart. So, but with this video it was really helpful, and I hope my videos are useful to other people in the same way. Well, I don't know if you can hear it, but the wind is absolutely blowing through. The allotment's something chronic at the moment. It has actually calmed down over the past 10 minutes. But this is the exact reason why I down put a polytunnel on the allotment, because this wind basically destroys anything like that. It's only just about the greenhouse copes, but I'll take you outside. You're not going to be able to hear me very well. Well, as you can see, because we've got the fields over there, as you can see, the wind gets a really good run up, and it's almost as though it actually dips down and comes back up. So as it hits the allotment, it's I'm not sure if the shape of the land actually amplifies the wind, but a few moments ago these weather vanes were spinning around, sort of really bad. So I've just quickly gone and got the video camera so you can actually see it. But this is exactly why I don't put a polytunnel on the allotment. I would love to do that, but it'd just get completely wrecked. John's polytunnel there, this one here, that had got polythene all over it 2 days ago, and as you can see, it's all gone. It's all been ripped off and it's all over the place. But about three or 4 years ago, the green tunnel ended up taking off, and ended up being all mangled and bent and twisted, and I had to fix all that up again. But just wanted to show you what it can be like up here when the wind picks up. So, I hope this episode of Jim's Allotment Garden has been some use to you. Please don't hesitate to put any comments or questions you've got below, and I'll always get back to you. And I'll see you on the next episode of Jim's Allotment Garden.